What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to a brand new video. Today we got a in-depth video of literally everything you need to know about recoil control. I get a lot of questions about this. I get a lot of accusations about this. People think I use Cronus or Zen or whatever you can use to reduce recoil. But in this video I will, with a controller cam, exactly explain what I do and what you need to do to get better at controlling recoil. Some stuff that's only visual, so it might look like there's less recoil, but there isn't. Some stuff that will make it easier for you to control recoil, what sensitivities you use, and overall what you need to focus on to improve on recoil control. This goes for any battlefield pretty much. I will explain it in 2042. Each battlefield has different recoil amounts. 2042 is actually kind of on the low side for recoil. You have Battlefield 1, Battlefield 5. All the gunplays are a little bit different, but the basics of this video will be able, you can apply them to any battlefield you pretty much play and almost any shooter. But this video will be explained on 2042, so there will be some specific 2042 settings that you should try out or practice that will only be for 2042. But overall the basics will really help you to control recoil in pretty much any FPS game. So let's get into it. Alright, so we jumped in a private server. I got the assault rifle, the M5A3 in my hands right now, which has a very basic recoil pattern. Some recoil patterns, every gun has different recoil patterns obviously, so I wanted to touch the basics first and then we're going in depth with how to control recoil. I got the controller cam set up. So recoil pretty much is all the kick the weapon does when you're shooting. So if I don't do anything and I just shoot, this is what happened. Now you see the M5A3 has a very straight line. It goes a little bit on the top right, but pretty much straight up. The more straight a recoil will go up, the easier it is to control, because you only have to counter the amount of recoil that goes up. If recoil would go like, as example, like this, which it rarely does, it's very hard to control, because this recoil will go up, it will go left, right, so there's a lot of horizontal recoil. And there's a lot of vertical recoil, which you have to counter both. So if a gun has a lot of recoil, usually it doesn't even mean it will go up straight a lot, but it will also mean it will go horizontal, and you have to respond to that very quickly, which makes overall recoil control harder. So when guns have a lot more recoil, it's not just the kick that goes up, but it's also the kick that goes left and right, which is a lot harder to control. Basic info, because you have to counter both ways. You have to go with your thumb to the left and the right while pressing down as well to counter the recoil properly. So what you want to do is, if a recoil goes like this, you want to move your controller this way. So it goes to the top right a little bit. You want to go to the bottom left a little bit. Not much. If you just go down, straight down, you'll see that the recoil goes a little bit weird the other direction. So you're gonna have to try and start getting a feel for this, and eventually you will get pretty accurate with it. You can still see that my gun sometimes makes weird circles. It's always hard to react to that. That's always the hardest part of recoil control. But overall, you can get pretty steady with a gun that has a very standard recoil pattern, like the M5A3. Now the next thing you need to know is what sensitivity you use will matter how much you have to control recoil. If you use a high sensitivity, you need to move your thumb a lot less on your control stick to aim with than if you have a high sensitivity, because you need to counter a lot more if you use a lower sensitivity. So having a higher sensitivity will make you have to move less in order to control recoil, but you also have to be a little bit more precise, so a little bit more sensitive with your thumb. So I'm gonna show an example. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit on my thumb in the next clip, and then you'll see the difference. So we're back with the PKP, which is a gun that has a lot more recoil. I've zoomed in the camera a little bit more on my thumb. Sorry, the angle is a little bit awkward. I had to figure out a creative setup to get it to zoomed in like this. So all you do is control recoil with this one. I'm going to show you the basic recoil pattern of the PKP. Then I'll show the recoil pattern if you have a high sensitivity, and then I'll show how the recoil pattern is when you use a lower sensitivity. So this is how the basic, let me make sure I'm on the same distance. So we go right against the fence, shoot straight forward. So this is what happens if I don't control it at all. A little bit similar to the M5A3, also top right recoil control. Now I'm going to show you guys my sensitivity, which should be right here. I use soldier aim. This is aim assist. This is on 70. The aim sensitivity is on 90. And then what is important that's down here is the zoom sensitivity. That's on 50. So this is this is not necessarily high. I would say the aim sensitivity is definitely high, 90%, but the soldier aim sensitivity is 50, which means it has a 50% sensitivity than my soldier aim sensitivity. So if I would use 45 here and 100 here, which means 100%, it would feel the exact same. Now let's put it higher. Of course, I need to adjust a little bit to this. We're gonna put this on. Let's do 100. Okay, so now it's on 100. This is a pretty high sensitivity, and I'm gonna try and recontrol. I hope I can try and do this first try, and then you'll see how much I'm gonna need to move my thumb. So focus on my thumb when I'm controlling recoil. This might take a few attempts. Let's try it again. Okay, so you could still see very little movement on my right thumb, even though I have to try my best, because if I don't do anything, this will happen. I have to reload the gun. Alright, so while it's reloading, I'm gonna lower my soldier aim sensitivity a lot. We're going down to maybe, let's do 10. This is literally the lowest you can go. Now, you're gonna see a lot of difference in how much my thumb will need to counter the recoil. I'll show a clip right now of the comparison of just the camera right next to each other, but you can see the difference in terms of movement a lot. Now, what you need to do with this information is if you have a high sensitivity, you need to keep in mind that you need to be very precise with your aim. And you also need to move less in order to control the recoil. Alright, so what I want to talk about next is recoil types. So you have, what I explained, you had the vertical recoil, which is pretty much going straight up, like I'm doing right now. Then you have horizontal recoil, which will go like this pretty much. Recoil almost always goes up, but horizontal recoil will go left and right as well. And now you have burst weapons, which usually kind of work similar to semi-automatic weapons, except usually you have to control the recoil a little bit less on burst weapons than semi-auto weapons. So I wanted to talk about a little bit about how to control semi-auto weapons. This goes a little bit different. When you have automatic weapons, recoil control is very steady. It will gradually go up or left or right. And because you hold down the trigger, the pattern is always the same. Semi-automatic weapons are a little bit different. Usually the recoil, let me see on the vehicle, I'm going to try and just not control it. We'll go a little bit more distance so you see the difference a little bit more. Usually the recoil, there you can see it, goes pretty straight up. And this is usually the case with a lot of semi-autos. There's always like some semi-automatic weapons that will work a little bit different. But now what's gonna matter is how fast you shoot the gun. Of course, there's a limit on how fast you can shoot a semi-automatic weapon, but the faster you shoot it, the more you have to control the recoil, which is something that I see a lot of people forget, is they have a very fast trigger finger and then they lose all accuracy on the semi. So if I would shoot very slowly without controlling recoil, you see that the gun is very steady. It shoots at the same point every single time. If I shoot it too quickly, you see the recoil will go up. So very basic. The less you the less fast you shoot, the less you have to control your recoil and the more accurate you can be. So for semi-autos, it's very easy. If you get good at this, you can very easily shoot players from a longer target because you can just shoot a little bit slower. Well, if they're up close, you can shoot a lot faster because it will make it easier to keep your shots on the target. So keep that in mind when you're using semi-automatic weapons. Alright, on to a kind of a big secret maybe, and I don't think this is really a secret, but I kind of want to explain how it works, and it's a visual recoil on 2042 and in Battlefield in general. Sometimes you will see streamers play with a super high field of view, like I'm running right now. I'm running max field of view. I normally run 90 field of view, but this is for an example. What happens with those players is that usually it looks like they have a lot less recoil than anyone else do. And this doesn't have to do with them actually having less recoil, but there is a setting you can use which will make it look like you have less recoil, and overall give you a better understanding of how this visual affects the recoil. So right now I use max field of view. What's important with this, otherwise you won't notice this, is that you have ADS FOV on as well. So this setting is very important, otherwise you will not notice the difference. So I'm going to shoot the target right now without controlling the recoil. And you're going to have to see if you feel like it looks like I have more recoil or not, compared to the second comparison I'll do. So I'm going to hold down the trigger. It's going up pretty straight. Look a little bit closer. It's going up pretty much vertical. And now I'm going to turn off ADS FOV. And now it should appear, I don't know how far I was standing away, but now it should appear like I have a lot more recoil. While in fact, it is pretty much the same. Now we're going to put this to the test. I'm going to actually try and control it. Let's make sure I keep the same distance. So we're going up against the pole and we're going to try and shoot this target. Now you're going to see which one has more recoil, or which one looks like it has more recoil. So we'll turn this on. I'm going to try my hardest to be as consistent with this as possible. There you go. There's definitely a lot of spread here. We'll go back. Now I'm going to turn this setting off. I'll try and control the recoil. A bit rough at the start. Alright, let's look a little bit closer. Let's ignore the first burst that I kind of messed up these few shots. But you can see this recoil and this recoil, they pretty much look the same. Of course, they're going to be a little bit different. I'll try my best to control it as much as I possibly can. And only visual, it might have looked like I needed to control less recoil here than here. Well, in fact, this was not the case. So what you need to keep in mind is if you're trying to use this setting, or if you see someone use this setting, it will visually look like they have less recoil when you play around with these type of settings, instead of someone who has basic field of view and maybe ADS FOV off. This effect will only occur if you use a high field of view and ADS FOV on. That is very important to know. If you use a lower field of view, let's run down to maybe 70, and you have this on, it will still look like I have a lot more recoil. And why? It's because the ADS FOV, this setting right here, will only turn on your field of view as much as your actual field of view is. So if you have this turned on and you use a field of view of 70 while you're zooming in, your ADS field of view will be similar to that, so it will be 70 right now. The lower your field of view is and you turn this on, the more visual recoil it will look like you have. Well, in fact, you don't actually have more recoil. So right now it should look like I have a lot more recoil than when I turn this all the way up to 105. Well, it's pretty much going to be the exact same. So this is an important setting to keep in mind. I would definitely advise to try this out. It's not going to help you actually control recoil, but it will make it visually look a little bit more easy. And it could actually mentally help you control recoil a little bit more. I definitely noticed some improvements when I adjusted to these settings in order for, trying to go for longer range targets. Because you get sometimes a little bit overwhelmed when you use those lower FOVs and you turn off your ADS FOV, you will get a little bit overwhelmed with how much recoil it looks like you need to control in comparison to how much you actually need to control. So definitely give this setting a try. It helped out for me a lot trying to control recoil. A lot of streamers use this. If you ever see someone like, hey, this guy looks a little bit suspicious, it barely looks like he has any recoil, it's probably because of these settings and not because he's actually using some type of cheating device or stuff like that. So now I wanted to talk about the final part of recoil control, and that is attachments. You gotta keep in mind, I see a lot of players make mistakes about picking attachments. What you gotta keep in mind when you're trying to put attachments on your weapons is which one you actually want to use and why to use them. Now I was talking earlier about horizontal and vertical recoil. This is why the attachments are very important to pick. If you have the understanding that vertical recoil, the recoil that pretty much always goes up in one direction, is a lot easier to control than horizontal recoil, which will go both left and right. Because to horizontal recoil, you're going to have to need good reaction speed, because you need to respond to the recoil. While the vertical recoil, if a gun just has vertical recoil, you only need to practice a recoil pattern. You don't need to react to it, because you only need to press your thumb in the other direction or drag your mouse into the other direction the recoil is actually going. So when you're picking attachments, keep in mind that horizontal recoil is harder to control than vertical recoil. Now every gun has different. Some guns have a lot of vertical recoil, some guns have a lot of horizontal recoil, some guns have both. So what you want to keep in mind is if you're trying to use the gun, see what type of recoil it actually has. If it has no vertical recoil at all and only horizontal recoil, try and reduce the horizontal recoil. But in general, and I use this for pretty much every weapon I possibly have, is I always try and reduce the horizontal recoil. Now you have, for the basic stuff, you can use close combat, which will increase your recoil control. I think most weapons that have close combat rounds have this setting. Now for the barrel, or for the undergrip, I mean, you usually have these two options. It's the LWG grip and the Cobra grip. I want to talk about this a little bit later, but I first wanted to talk about the muzzle that you can use. Here is where there's a lot of recoil control attachments that you can try and use on the weapon. So you have these recoil control minus weapon accuracy, and you also have these settings which will usually either increase the vertical recoil or horizontal recoil. Now what it means when it says recoil control minus weapon accuracy is the actual spread of weapons. You might have noticed that weapons don't always shoot straight. Even if you stay on target, some of the bullets might still miss the target, and that's because of weapon spread or weapon accuracy. So I would never use these type of attachments unless they increase the weapon accuracy and the gun overall doesn't have a lot of recoil. If your gun has a lot of spread, but not a lot of recoil, then you should try and maybe use the attachments like the tactical compensator that I'm showcasing here. But I usually go for the recoil controls. So here I have the attachments for vertical recoil control and horizontal recoil control. Now why I do not use this attachments is because it increases the horizontal recoil. It's a minus, which means it will get worse, and plus vertical recoil control, which obviously means it will get less. Now, I personally never use this attachment because it will increase horizontal recoil, which is a recoil pattern you do not want to control. Even though a lot of players will go for this attachments because vertical recoil control is only recoil that they think a gun has. But horizontal recoil control is way more important. So that's why I almost always go for the Arkham Tactical Muzzle Brake, which might increase the vertical recoil control, but as I said earlier, it is a pattern you can get used to instead of the horizontal recoil control, which is a pattern that's based on reaction speed and accuracy. So always try and lower the horizontal recoil if you can. So those are the basic and very important things you need to know while controlling recoil. You gotta keep in mind that recoil control takes time and it takes practice, but there's a lot of these little things that a lot of beginners don't know about a game, And I definitely suggest trying to practice with the knowledge I hope to give you guys. So if this video was useful, please be sure to leave a comment, a like, push it a little bit into the algorithm, especially to the ones who watch all the way through. Thank you very much for the support. Hopefully it was useful. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you guys in the next video.